Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Jan Erickson from Stepping Aside, and welcome to Somewhat Daily Tarot and Rune for the 13th day of February, 2019. Well, tomorrow, my husband and I will have lived in our home for, 38 years. We moved here on Valentine's Day of 1981, so this time, 38 years ago, we were packing up the Ryder truck and moving east from the Portland area to Central Oregon. And we've been here in the same place ever since. We bought a place with 5 acres, and we raised both of our boys here, and they went to public school for a little while, and then when my oldest was at the end of 7th grade and my youngest was at the end of 4th, we decided to homeschool from that point forward. And so we did that, and they were both gifted, so they weren't really getting challenged enough. They weren't, and this way, it wasn't that they were challenged more, it's that they were able to lead their own education, basically. I facilitated all of it, but it was something, we adopted a more unschooling approach, although with an eye toward college. So there were certain things that were structured, but and things they need to know, about how you navigate college. But beyond that, a lot of it was, they had the basic things, but history, for example, was with Howard Zinn's the People's History of the United States, which is history told from the perspective of the indigenous population, basically, the ones that got screwed, basically. History has a tendency to be written by the winners, and it doesn't always reflect the truth. And so I didn't want them to have to do that, so that was kind of the focus, if you will, of my kids' final schooling at home. Oh, the horror. They read Howard Zinn. Oh, my goodness. But anyway, today, let's see, yesterday was Wednesday, wasn't it? Today is Thursday, I guess, isn't it? Yeah, the 13th. Is that what we are here today? Oh, it's a Wednesday. I'm sorry. So was yesterday Tuesday? Did I say yesterday was Wednesday and it was a Mercury day? Or did I write that in the in the blog post I did last night? I have no idea. Well, okay, if I said yesterday was Wednesday, I screwed up. But yesterday was Tuesday. So today is Wednesday. And so today is a Mercury day, and it's about communication. No, I think that I did that on the blog. I don't think I did that here. I write the lunar transits. I try to get them up before the moon actually moves, and so sometimes I have to do it the day before. And so it moved at the 1 o'clock hour sometime, 1:32 or something like that this morning. And so I try to do I try to get that stuff up ahead of time. So I'm writing about the future, essentially. So I have a section in it on magical workings, and so I was talking about both Thursday or maybe, I don't know what I did. Maybe it was Wednesday and Thursday. I don't know what I did, actually. Should have been Thursday and Friday. I have to go back and look. Anyhow, today is a Wednesday, so it's a Mercury day. So it's a day for communication. So if you're going to work magic, it can be about communication. Maybe in relationships. That's the other thing, relationships with people. So if you need to increase communication with somebody, maybe you're not interacting well with somebody, or you're finding maybe you've got somebody in your life that's just difficult, and you want to find a way to heal that. So you might do a working today that does that. That has that as its focus. Sometimes you have to walk away from people. I realize that. For me, as an empath, it isn't necessarily an intellectual judgment or an emotional judgment of why I might feel like I can't be around somebody. It's about the energy. Sometimes someone's energy is just either intense enough. And I found this out learning about human design, and it has to do about auras. And I guess I knew this, but the way that they put it was just so fascinating, and it just sort of it resonated the most with me. But and I realized because I realized it with respect to my husband and myself. You know, I'm a generator type, and he's a manifestor type. There's 5 different types of personalities in human design, and those are 2 of them. And I have an aura that is enveloping, so it draws people in. And he has an aura that is a push energy, and so it is a repelling type of an aura. And when I thought about it in terms of energetic flow, something that he does sometimes, I'll be sitting in my chair, and he'll be like standing up, maybe 3, 4 feet away from me, 5 feet away, but he's kind of leaning in when he's talking to me. And it doesn't have to be much, just maybe a slight change in angle. And but he's being intense about what he's talking about. Maybe he's ranting about the president, or he's ranting about something, or he's describing something, or so. But it's intense, and he's kind of leaning forward. I can tell you what that feels like. That feels like a wave crashing over me. And he did this last night. I'm like, okay, back up. You're leaning, you're leaning in, and he gets back. He's like, oh, sorry, because now he's aware of it. He realizes because he can feel his aura, moving forward in those moments. He can actually feel himself doing that energetic push toward me. And so even he now feels it after I described it to. I says, have you ever thought about this when I'm telling you you're because I'll even do this. I had a lady at a dentist office do this to me. She wasn't very nice to me anyway, and she brought, instead of having me come to the counter, what she did is she stood over the top of me. She came out around and she wants me to sign something. Well, I have to read it, right? I have to fill things out. It's going to take me a little bit, and she's standing like right here, leaning into me, and I'm like, could you please go away? I can't, I just can't take it. It's too much. So it's, so for me, sometimes it's simply that there's a difference in aura. Maybe somebody's just got too projective of an aura, and I can't, it's too much for me. I literally can't breathe. I cannot breathe when I'm around somebody like that. And oftentimes they're just the nicest people. And so it's just that I can't, either I have to limit my time, which I have to figure out a way how to do that without offending anybody or making them feel self-conscious or bad or anything, because you don't want anybody to feel bad about any of that. It's just who we are. There's nothing you can do about it. It just is what it is. And for somebody like me who's so sensitive to energy from other people, it just is. You have to find a way to deal with it in a way that's not hurtful. Oh God, get away from me! You can't do that. So anyway, you can work magic around that. Where you're trying to increase communication or deal with things. I like to deal with things to bring things back to energetic balance when I do magic. So that's usually my focus. But I'm not really one of those people that tries to influence free will. I actually don't believe you should do that. So anyhow, that's just me. You can do what you want. Truly, it's everybody's choice. It's just what your comfort level is. That's all. And it's no judgment for anybody who does anything else. So anyhow, so don't write me letters. Don't send me hate mail. Don't put awful things in the comments. I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying what I'm comfortable with. That's all. I think it's fine what anyone else wants to do. So anyhow, if this is your first time here, well, you can see it's an odd place to be, but welcome. I so appreciate that you're here. If you've been here before, thank you for coming back. Thank you for putting up with me. So what we do here is we start out with just the idea of taking one card and one rune and looking at them and seeing how they combine together, if there's some synchronicity, which technically, well, most of the time there is. It's weird. I mean, some days to the point that literally the cards will tell a story with the rune finishing it, and it's so amazing when that happens. But it happens more often than it doesn't. So it's kind of cool. And anyway, I ended up modifying this instead of somewhat daily tarot and rune with the implication of one tarot card and one rune. I end up usually taking 3 cards, but sometimes I don't. It just depends on if I can get enough information or if I feel like, I need more. If I draw a court card, I guarantee you I will draw another card because court cards need something really to interact with. They're not specific enough. You're either dealing with the individual on the card or who that individual might represent on the card, or you're dealing with the qualities of that individual. So there's just too much to not have something to interact with. So I like to have that. And then sometimes it just feels like we need to know what happened before, or what brought us to this point where this card is, or where are we going from here. So we just need a little more information. So that's why I oftentimes just pull 3 cards, but I don't do it right off the bat. I'll do one at a time. So, and the other thing I do is I count 13 and draw that card. That's just my process. So anyhow, let's get started. Enough chatting and, oh, well, so this is a 7 of Swords. Now, just at first blush, I view this as theft of intellectual property, but that's just me. I'm an author, so, I think in those, it's like, okay, that looks familiar. But, sometimes it just is, so. The 7's about balance. It's about balancing our shadow side with spirit. And Swords is the air element. It represents the air element, so our intellect, reason. But here you see you have swords that have been stuck into the ground, right? And you see the tents off in the background. And so what's happened here is that they're all back from battle. They're in their tents. They're celebrating or commiserating or doing whatever they're doing, while somebody outside is taking this stuff. So you've taken the eye off the ball, haven't you? And now someone's taken off with, your intellectual property, maybe. In this case, the guy's stealing the swords. So maybe, he's a spy from the other side, right? So maybe someone is, you're experiencing something, one thing one of my kids said about being in college, he would have to, he was studying computer engineering, and they would have to work in groups because when you work because when you work in a place that does this sort of thing, you're not always just individually programming. You're working as a team, and so you've got more than one person on the project, and so you have to learn how to do that. And so I understand why they do that. Ultimately, he recommended to, I think, the head of the program that what you need to be doing is grading people individually, because inevitably he would be the one that did all the work, and everyone else would just be clueless or whatever, and they just wouldn't meet. They wouldn't come to meetings. They wouldn't be prepared, and so he didn't want to get a bad grade, so he would just do the project, and then basically they would all get a group grade based on what he did. Well, that's a form of theft of intellectual property, isn't it? When you're part of a team and you're getting the accolades and the grade for something that you didn't even do. And so that's one form of it. The other is that maybe someone takes something from you, your ideas, and they pass them off as their own. So maybe you're experiencing something like that today. We see it a lot, with Donald. He'll say, "Oh yeah, I did this, I did that," But in fact, what he did, oh, there goes a couple cards. What he did was just claim ownership for something that the last guy did. It's a weird thing that people want to do. There was an expression well, it was from my husband's black belt thesis. We're both black belts, and uh, when in Kempo, and in Kempo you have to do a thesis, not just do the testing and all the requirements for it, but you have to actually present a thesis. And so his was about writing on the coattails of others, you know, within a dojo setting. And again, not, you know, deriving your accolades from the work of someone else. So whenever I see the Seven of Swords, that's what I think of. It's like, you know, you know, maybe you're consciously taking the eye off the ball. In this case, you know, it kind of feels that way because there's nobody there to guard the armaments. There's nobody there to guard what it is that they have to defend themselves with. And so somebody could be misinterpreting your words. They could be trying to deceive you into thinking something is safe when it's not. So a lot of this is how we're communicating with someone else, maybe, what message we're sending. But this is a card of deception. Okay, when you see the Seven of Swords, there's something deceptive happening here, and either we've taken, you know, we've set it up ourselves by not paying attention to what's going on, or, you know, we think we're safe, we think we can trust somebody, and then we find out that we can't, that they're in fact deceiving us, and they know it, and they're making sure that you don't know it. And so if you feel like, you know, something just isn't right now in your life, kind of look in that direction and see if maybe somebody is either distorting something you've said, or 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 talking about something you've done in a way that just isn't right, or, you know, maybe they're taking your ideas and presenting them as their own to the boss, or something like that, or maybe you're just the one that's having to pull the weight and with the intellectual process of something, and nobody is really helping you, and instead they're just going to take and ride on your own coattails, like my husband presented in his black belt thesis. So I don't know. Let's draw another card. I mean, this card reminds me of this. It just sort of resonates that way because I write, and so it's like, well, you know, and you try really hard not to use the words of other people, and if you do, you have to quote them, right? You have to say so. Uh, and sometimes, you know, you get to thinking, and you know, we read and we watch the news and all of that, and so you have to be really careful. And sometimes I'll write a line and go, is that mine or is that somebody else's? You know, that sounds too familiar. So I'll think, well, maybe that's a line that I use. And if I'm not sure that it's mine, then I just rewrite it, because I don't want to ever do that, right? Um, I'm just very sensitive to how people express themselves. And you want to do it in a way that is, if you're a writer, you want to do it in a way that if you are going to use someone else's words, that you quote it, you know, and you do what you have to do with respect to that. You know, you put your attribution to them. But I don't know, you know, the whole thing is always just I mean, my whole life, even as a child, you know, I would say something and all of a sudden somebody else would take that idea and go take it to the teacher. The teacher would be like, oh, that's great. I was like, so, I mean, we've all had this happen in our lives. So if that's what this is, well, you know, be thinking about that. Here we have, though, the Nine of Pentacles. So here we have a very wealthy woman, could be the queen. She's got her falcon on her arm, so it's likely the queen. She's got her money all around her, the finery. She's dressed very, very well. It's a beautiful gown. And there's just abundance all around. Here, the nine is about completion. So she's living a settled life, basically. Now, did that happen at the expense of others? Little Miss Conspiracy Theorist thinks. No. But did she derive, or is this what she's doing and she's not paying attention? She's so wrapped up in her own thing, you know, this sense of completion. I don't have to pay attention, maybe. Let's look if there's anything that we can see here, though, with the nine of, oh, I'm in the tens here. Nine of Wands, Nine of Discs. Okay. No, I mean, this really isn't. This is about inheritance and productive, active, settled life, living your ideals, gain, windfall. Well, unless this is what you're doing to get it, is somebody in your life living off your own spoils? So either we were living a productive and settled life where we were, doing well, because this woman is clearly doing well in her life in the Nine of Pentacles. We're going to do another card though. But we have a 7 here where some of that maybe is being taken away. At least the intellectual side of it, how it is that but part of the intellect, you're combining air with fire basically to manifest things, right? Because you think it up and then the fire manifests it, right? So intellect thinks it up, will manifest. But here we've got a lady that's seemingly to suggest that either she's reaping the rewards of whatever this was, or they're doing it maybe on behalf of her. But the long and the short of this is odd, isn't it? That you have somebody stealing something and then somebody with a settled life. So either she doesn't know this is going on, or he's doing it maybe on her behalf. Well, we have the King of Pentacles, so now I'm even more concerned. No, I'm not going to pull a card because it's the third one. I'm gonna hedge my bets here. Quit while I'm ahead. The King of Pentacles, what I like about this card is even though he's surrounded by all of his finery, you can see the castle in the background. It's either all about him or he's a very benevolent guy. Okay, he's either he's like the Four of Pentacles, where you see the guy we did that. I guess that was yesterday, where he's sitting and he's got the pentacle on top and he's holding onto it right here, and he's got him underneath each foot. So he's stepping on them, so his back is to the town, back to the kingdom. And so you don't know if this is all about his own wealth or if it's about the wealth of others. I mean, ideally, Pentacles is about our whole physical existence in life. And so it's about society as well. It's not just about the individual. And so with a king, you never know if there's somebody that are going to actually think about what it is they're the king of, and consider all of that, and consider the people that he rules, or is he just going to think about himself? And so what this really is suggesting to me, and I don't like to think this about, because really the King of Pentacles is like my last king that I can feel comfortable with. The others, I just don't. But because the King of Cups can be passive aggressive, and that's no fun. And the Queen of Cups, I mean, she can be okay, but she can be shallow. But the King of Wands, he can be very dynamic and all of that, but he can also be arrogant, and reminds me of the Emperor, who I regard as somewhat arrogant and not really, I mean, he's only there for the Queen and the Empress. That's really all he's there for. So anyhow, so you can see I don't have a good relationship with kings. But then I'm a witch, so that's just the way that is. But you wonder, is this life built on deception? See what I'm saying? In other words, is this how they got their fortune? Did they obtain it by deception? So look hard if that's happening in your life. If you feel like somebody is taking something from you, or if you're at work and people are using your ideas and claiming ownership for them, that's a really big deal. It describes your worth or lack thereof, as an employee, if you never have any ideas, right? But in truth, if you're the one coming up with all of it and someone else is getting credit for it, that isn't right. And that kind of seems like that's what this is. Here we have, we have the king and possibly the queen here, that out of all of this, they've derived quite a bit of wealth, but they're stealing from other people to do it. So, you could say with the emoluments stuff that we're talking about these days, in terms of the investigation of Donald, are we describing, he and his wife here and the theft of whatever from the American people? One could argue that as he continues to do what he does, that whole hotel thing, that they redid, all the people I mean, he's making money hand over fist while being the president. You can't do that. That's actually illegal. But it takes the will of Congress to do something about it, right? Well, here we have Yira. And Yira is the 12th rune of the Elder Futhark, and so energetically it's a 3. So, it's a rune of balance, basically. And it's also thought of as the rune of transformation. It's moving energy from one state to another. So in a sense, it also represents as above, so below. You could look at it that way. I use it in a garden vine rune that I've created that I hang around in different, greenhouses and little garden spots that I have here on the property, just to encourage growth. It's a rune of fertility and growth, basically. You've got what you see here, though, is Kenaz forward and reversed. So you're looking at even though it's an earth element rune, I believe, I'll double check though, you're still looking at clarity with it, the balance of that, of light and dark, maybe. Again, that's very similar to the 7, even though it's not the 7th rune, Gebo is. And there you're looking at balanced energy exchange. But this being, but there's still energy with the 3 that's catalytic, even though this is, you would think that would make this a fire element rune, but it's not, it's earth. But it basically brings things to pass, let's see. It means year, the rune of transformation and balance, moves energy through the body. It aligns energy in relationships. So where you have people, and that may be the key here, when you think about balance, now obviously in life, nothing is ever going to be 50-50 with you and someone else. It just isn't. There's going to be times when, you're going to give way to somebody else, and at times they're going to give way to you and to your needs. And so sometimes, we're not going to be in a 50-50 balance with people. It's just not realistic. But we can have a balanced sort of energy exchange, even if you're someone in the relationship that gives more, as long as you're fine with that and that works for both of you, then you've achieved a sense of balance, haven't you? That's true for if you're, say if you're in a marriage where your partner is disabled, and you have to act also as a caregiver. Well, in that respect, you could think, well, I'm giving more to the relationship than my partner is. Well, you're not, though, because you're there and you have this wonderful mutual exchange of love and reciprocity, don't you? So again, that would be an example of something that technically might not be balanced, at least in one aspect. In other aspects, it is, see, because there's an agreement there, right? So, but here, in looking at the cards, what this tells me is that this couple here, the king and his wife, or the queen, or whatever she is, that the royalty has, or the people of means have more at the and they've done so at the expense of someone else, of other people. So maybe even the battle was won by the people in the tent, but it doesn't matter because these people have so much power and authority that they're going to take anyway. And it just seems to be the most natural thing in the world to do, to have people with means take from people, that don't. So it's the classic, dichotomy between haves and have-nots, right? So I have to think that this is something that if you're doing things, that are doing it at the expense of someone else, to where it enriches you at their expense. Kind of what happened to me the other day. Then I would say knock it off. It's not the right way. You're not moving in a balanced exchange with others. You're not expressing Yara in your life. You're not. You're trying to get something that you're just not entitled to, or even if it's temporary, you're not. You're still shifting the balance in your favor when there's a better balance that could be struck. And so, if that's happening in your life, don't allow it. Stand up and say no, and don't take your. And I guess the other thing these days is it may not pay to be too trusting of people. It's not that you want to assume that everybody's going to do something bad to you. You don't want to do that, but you want to keep it in the, maybe be a little more reserved about others until you really get to know them. And then pay attention, because things can always shift in the lives of people, and stressors can happen that maybe make people do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. And so maybe they feel like, if it's, say, in a job situation, maybe you've got somebody in the office that is just afraid of losing their job. And so they take something of yours, an idea of something, and they present it to the boss, and they're getting the accolades and you're not. So, I mean, you can understand how maybe sometimes that happens in someone's life. But at the same time, you have to have a way of interacting with somebody that doesn't, do that to them, that doesn't take from them. And so again, you can look at this from both sides of the equation. If this is happening, if you feel like this is happening to you, it likely is. So pay attention and look around and see who might be doing it. Um, Sometimes the ideas are what, I mean, ideas are what propel things forward, right? That's where it all begins. I have an idea. Well, it's not that you want to hold so tightly onto your ideas that you never want to express them, because you're afraid that they're not going to be respected, or someone's going to take it for their own or whatever. But at this, and so in a way, ideas are nothing if you don't share them with the world. But at the same time, it's nice to get credit for it, and you don't need someone taking that from you. So if that's happening, if you feel like that's happening, then just take a step back and look around and see where you think that might be happening. And then, you might have to be a little savvy how you deal with it. So, and if this is simply describing what's happening in our country, then, well, it's just another day in Donald's America. So anyhow, that too shall end at some point, and hopefully sooner than later. So anyhow, I guess that's it then. That's kind of cool. So since today is Wednesday and not Thursday, I will be back tomorrow. Anyhow, I just do this 4 days a week. So anyhow, thanks so much for stopping by. Check out the blog, Stepping Aside at I'mSteppingAside.com. Again, the lunar transits are up. And it's kind of, it's really geared toward, people that work magic, but it's also, the aspects and things like that. That's for everybody. But the magical working side of it, and then I do chart balances and all of that. But how I have my astrological chart set up, I use solar fire. Ultimately, I also use time passages. I like that one too. But I like solar fire because it has a broader spectrum of focus. And so you'll find, planetary hours, and you'll find, the different types of astrology. They do things, they do reports from all kinds of perspectives. And so you can get all of the basic numbers for all of it, not the interpretations of it there in that section of the software, but you can take a look at aspects and what planets are involved and all of that. It's just a really cool piece of software, and I like it really well. But you can create your charts. You can actually create them. You can customize them. And so I went into the esoteric ones, and I looked at them, and then I grabbed one that had stuff already that I wanted on there. But mine will include like the mansions of the moon and the planetary hours for that day, that particular day, and then like around the full moon and stuff. If I'm doing one around there, what I did last time is I did the planetary hours for each day that was in the lunar cycle. So for both days, I had them there. But the thing is that I don't have to do that because really the hours aren't that different. And again, you know, if you, I'm on the Pacific, I'm by the Pacific, you know, I'm on the West Coast, so I'm Pacific Standard Time. If you're in Europe, well, that just blows it out of the water. So you have to use one of those if you're going to figure out planetary hours, and you don't want to have to do it mathematically. Then you're going to have to find. You can go to lunarium.com or something. I think Lunarium is the site, and they have a planetary hours calculator, so you can do it that way if you want to get down to the actual, you know, time. But the thing is that you don't have to do it for each day because it's not going to move that much. It is still you're still going to be within that same planetary hour. So anyhow, that's if you want to incorporate that kind of stuff into your magic. Witches like to align. Okay, they like to align energies, and so you want to do it. You know, you want to do something expansive. You know, in an hour of Jupiter, for example. So we got to know what time that is, and so you have to figure that out on a daily basis because the sun rises and sets at different times every day. So you can't just use. I mean, if you want to get really specific, you can't just use the day before. Although, yes, you can. So you just target it around the middle of that hour, and you'll be fine. But realistically, you know, if you want to get down to the real nitty gritty of it, then you would figure it out yourself, you know, and then that way, you know, you'd know what you need to use. So anyhow, but anyway, that's what I do as far as that astrological chart. So that's why it looks weird, and has modes and elements and things like that on there. Anyhow, that way, you know, someone like me can just look at it and go, oh, okay, so that's more active today and all of that. So yeah, I do gear it toward working magic. So anyhow, that's just me. So check that out if you want. That's over at imsteppingaside.com. And but again, thanks for coming by. Click subscribe. I'd love you to do that if you haven't already. And be good to yourself, be good to one another, and blessed be.